Tyler emerged from the training facility a changed person. His body ached from 3 days of trials that had pushed him far beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. His mind was reeling from encounters with simulated horrors that had shown him just how dangerous and vast the universe really was, but most importantly, his heart was filled with a new understanding of what the Royal Guards truly represented. Lieutenant Xixinos walked beside him as they returned to the upper levels of the palace. The guards' golden eyes, which had once seemed intimidating and alien to Tyler, now looked familiar and reassuring. Tyler had learned to read the subtle signs of emotion in those glowing orbs, to recognize concern, approval, and even something like friendship. "How do you feel?" the lieutenant asked as they climbed the stone steps. Tyler thought about the question carefully. 3 days ago, he would have given a quick, superficial answer. Now he understood that the question deserved real consideration. "Scared," he said honestly. "Humbled. Ashamed of who I was when I arrived here, and grateful to be alive." "Those are good feelings for someone who has learned important truths," Lieutenant Xixinos replied. "Fear keeps you alert to danger. Humility allows you to continue learning. Shame motivates you to be better, and gratitude helps you appreciate what others have sacrificed for you." They reached the Hall of Honor, where Tyler's trial had begun. The memorial plaques still lined the walls, but now Tyler saw them completely differently. Instead of boring displays about dead aliens, he saw tributes to heroes who had faced the kinds of challenges he had just experienced. Except their battles had been real, and the stakes had been the survival of entire civilizations. High Priestess Nalthara was waiting for them, along with Captain Veltar, Minister Kexara, and Ambassador Blake. Tyler's father looked like he had aged years during the 3 days of trials, his face drawn with worry and exhaustion. "Tyler," Ambassador Blake said, embracing his son. "Thank God you're alive, I was so worried." Tyler hugged his father back, but his attention was focused on High Priestess Nalthara. The ancient Zephyrian studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "You have completed the trials," she said. "But completion is not the same as success. Tell me, Tyler Blake of Earth, what have you learned?" Tyler took a deep breath, knowing that his life still hung in the balance. But more than that, he knew that this moment would determine not just whether he lived or died, but what kind of person he would be for the rest of his life. "I learned that I was a fool," he began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I thought I understood strength and courage and advancement, but I understood nothing. I mocked warriors who have sacrificed more than I could ever imagine. I insulted the memory of heroes who died protecting people like me, people who didn't even know they needed protecting." He turned to face the memorial plaques, his voice growing stronger as he continued. "I learned that real courage isn't about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about facing the darkness even when you're terrified, even when you know you might die, because someone has to stand between the innocent and the things that would destroy them." High Priestess Nalthara nodded slowly. "Continue." "I learned that my people exist because of the sacrifices made by yours," Tyler said, looking directly at Captain Veltar. "Earth wasn't discovered by aliens. We were saved by them. Humanity didn't develop independently. We were protected and guided so we could grow safely. And instead of being grateful for that protection, I came here acting like we were superior to the people who have been keeping us alive for thousands of years." Captain Veltar's golden eyes had dimmed from their previous blazing fury to a softer, more thoughtful glow. "And what will you do with this knowledge?" Tyler had been thinking about that question throughout his trials. "I want to learn more. I want to understand not just the mistakes I made, but how to avoid making them again. I want to study Zephyrian history and culture, not because I have to, but because I owe it to your people to truly understand what you've done for the galaxy." He paused, then added, "And I want to make sure that other humans understand too. My species needs to know what we owe to yours. We need to know that we're not alone in the universe, and that the beings protecting us deserve our respect and gratitude, not our arrogance and mockery." High Priestess Nalthara exchanged glances with Captain Veltar and Minister Kexara. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. the kind that comes from centuries of working together. There is one final test, the High Priestess said. You speak of understanding and respect, but words are easy. Show us that your understanding is real. She gestured toward the memorial plaques. Choose one hero from these walls. Learn their name, their story, and their sacrifice. Tell us why their memory deserves honor. Tyler walked slowly along the wall, reading the symbols and studying the images. The text was in Zephyrian script, which he couldn't read, but his armor's translation systems provided the basic information. He stopped before one plaque that showed a female Zephyrian warrior in Royal Guard armor. This is Guard Commander Velthania, Tyler said, reading from his helmet's display. She led the defense of the Kepler Nursery during the Machine War. The Kepler Nursery was a system where 17 different species were developing their first civilizations. Tyler's voice grew more emotional as he continued reading. When the machines attacked, Commander Velthania and her unit knew they couldn't save all 17 worlds with the forces they had. So she made a choice. She divided her guards into 17 groups, sending one guard to each world with orders to fight until the civilians could be evacuated. He turned to face the others. She knew it was a suicide mission. 17 guards against a machine fleet that could consume star systems. But she did it anyway because those 17 worlds contained billions of innocent beings who couldn't defend themselves. Tyler's voice cracked as he finished the story. Commander Velthania was the last to evacuate. She stayed on the final world, holding off the machines alone while the last transport ships escaped. She died buying time for civilians she had never met, people whose names she didn't know, because it was the right thing to do. The silence that followed was profound. Tyler realized he was crying again, but this time it wasn't from fear or exhaustion. It was from finally understanding what real heroism looked like. That story, he said quietly, describes someone better than I could ever hope to be. But maybe, if I work hard enough and learn enough and grow enough, I could become someone worthy of the protection she died to provide. High Priestess Nalthara smiled, and for the first time it was a warm, genuine expression. Tyler Blake of Earth, you have passed the trial of understanding. Your life is yours to live. Captain Veltar stepped forward and performed a formal salute. Young human, you have shown that your species is capable of growth and wisdom. Perhaps there is hope for humanity after all. Tyler returned the salute as best he could, then did something that surprised everyone present. He walked to Lieutenant Zixinos and removed his training helmet, offering it back to the guard with both hands. Thank you, Tyler said simply, for teaching me what courage really means, for showing me what honor really costs, and for being patient with someone who didn't deserve your patience. Lieutenant Zixinos accepted the helmet and nodded respectfully. It was my honor, Tyler Blake. You faced trials that would have broken many beings and you emerged stronger. That is the mark of a true warrior. As Tyler prepared to leave Zephyr Prime with his father, High Priestess Nalthara presented him with a small pin made of the same metal as Royal Guard armor. It was simple and unadorned, just a small circle with the symbol of the Zephyrian Empire engraved in its center. This is a token of understanding, she explained. It marks you as someone who has seen the truth behind the protection we provide. Wear it with the knowledge that you carry the responsibility to share what you have learned. Tyler returned to Earth as a completely different person than the one who had left. He spent the next several years studying everything he could about Zephyrian culture and galactic history. He became a vocal advocate for deeper cooperation between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire, working to prepare humanity for eventual full membership in the galactic community. Years later, Tyler returned to Zephyr Prime as an official cultural liaison, one of the first humans to be granted that honor. He wore the small pin proudly, a reminder of the day he learned that true strength comes not from weapons or technology, but from the willingness to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost. Tyler hung in Lieutenant Zixinos' grip, his feet barely touching the crystal floor as Captain Veltar began to speak. The captain's voice carried the weight of centuries, and with each word, Tyler's understanding of his situation grew more terrifying. You think we are primitive, Captain Veltar said, his golden eyes blazing. You think your human technology makes you superior. Let me educate you about what you have insulted, child. The captain gestured to the memorial plaques surrounding them. These warriors you mocked fought in the War of the 12 Suns. Do you know what that was, young human? It was the greatest threat this galaxy has ever faced. Tyler tried to shake his head, but Lieutenant Zixanos' grip made movement difficult. He could only listen as Captain Veltar continued his terrifying education. Machines came from beyond the galactic rim, the captain said, his voice growing darker. Not simple robots like your species builds, but artificial intelligences that had consumed entire galactic clusters. They converted matter into more machines, turning planets into factories and stars into power sources. They had already destroyed half of our galaxy before anyone realized the scope of the threat. Minister Kexara stepped forward, her calm voice adding to the growing revelation. The machines were not interested in conquest or resources in any way your species would understand. They simply wanted to convert all organic matter into computational material. Every living being in the galaxy would have been dissolved and processed into thinking circuits. Tyler's eyes widened as the implication sank in. This wasn't ancient history or mythology. These people were talking about a real war against an enemy that sounded like something from humanity's worst nightmares. Your species, Captain Veltar continued, did not exist yet when this war began. The machines had been advancing for 3,000 years before the first human discovered agriculture. And when they finally reached this sector of the galaxy, there was only one force standing in their way. The captain touched his chest, and his armor began to glow with the same blue energy Tyler had seen in Lieutenant Zixanos' suit. The Royal Guard of the Zephyrian Empire. Lieutenant Zixanos spoke, his voice carrying notes of pride and sorrow. My predecessor in this armor, Guard Commander Thalvin, fought alone against a machine fleet that had consumed the Andorian system. 50 billion beings lived on those worlds. The machines turned them all into processing units in less than a day. Tyler felt sick. The scope of what these people were describing was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Wars that lasted millennia, enemies that consumed entire star systems, and these alien guards had somehow fought against all of that. Commander Thalvin's final battle, Lieutenant Zixanos continued, lasted 17 hours. He fought inside the machine mothership, a construct the size of your Earth's moon, destroying their central processing cores one by one. When his armor finally failed, he detonated his power core and took the entire enemy fleet with him. Captain, Veltar stepped closer to Tyler, his massive form radiating heat and energy. Every Royal Guard carries similar stories. We have fought enemies that your species cannot even comprehend. We have walked on the surface of dying stars to plant charges that would destabilize machine power systems. We have held the line against mechanical hordes that stretched from one side of a solar system to the other. Tyler's mind reeled. The guards he had been mocking as costume guys were veterans of battles that made every human war look like a playground scuffle. And they had won those battles, somehow defeating an enemy that had consumed half the galaxy. The war lasted 6,000 years, Minister Kexara said quietly. It ended only when the final machine intelligence was destroyed in the core of the galactic center. By that time, entire sectors had been sterilized of all organic life. Billions of species had been exterminated. But some species survived, Captain Veltar said, his eyes focusing intently on Tyler. Protected worlds, where young civilizations were allowed to develop under our shield. Worlds like Earth. Tyler's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Your species exists because we fought for your right to exist, Lieutenant Zixanos explained. The machines reached your solar system approximately 4,000 years ago. They began converting your asteroid belt into processing stations and were preparing to harvest your planet when Royal Guard forces intercepted them. The lieutenant's grip on Tyler's throat loosened slightly, allowing him to speak. You mean, Earth was attacked by these machine things? Earth was saved by these machine things being destroyed, Captain Veltar corrected. The battle took place in the space between your world and Mars. The wreckage of machine ships still orbits your sun, though your scientists haven't recognized it for what it is. Tyler stared at them in growing horror and disbelief. Everything. He thought he knew about human history, and development was being turned upside down. But we never knew. We don't have any records of alien contact or space battles. Because we made sure you didn't, Minister Kexara said gently. Your species was young and fragile. Knowledge of such threats would have either destroyed your civilization through panic or pushed you to develop weapons that would have destroyed yourselves. We have protected you not just from external enemies, but from dangerous knowledge. Captain Veltar touched another symbol on his armor, and a holographic display appeared in the air above them. Tyler saw images that made his mind struggle to process what he was seeing. Massive ships that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. Battles taking place around stars and everywhere. The blue-armored figures of royal guards fighting against endless waves of mechanical enemies. This is what real warfare looks like, the captain said. Not the small conflicts your species fights among itself, but battles for the survival of all organic life in the galaxy. One image showed a royal guard standing on what appeared to be the surface of a star, his armor glowing white-hot as he planted some kind of device in the solar material around him. Another showed guards fighting in the vacuum of space without any visible life support, their armor somehow protecting them from conditions that would instantly kill any human. Your species' most advanced spacecraft, Lieutenant Zixino said, could not survive even the approach to one of these battlefields. The energies involved would destroy your ships before they could get close enough to observe the fighting. Tyler looked down at his datapad, which was still lying on the crystal floor where it had fallen. The device he had been so proud of, the pinnacle of human technology, suddenly seemed like a child's toy compared to what he was seeing. That device, Captain Veltar noted, following Tyler's gaze, operates on quantum processing principles that we developed 30,000 years ago. We gave simplified versions of our technology to your species through carefully managed discoveries by your scientists. But why? Tyler asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why help us at all? Minister Kexara smiled sadly. Because young species have value, Tyler Blake. Because diversity of thought and culture makes the galaxy stronger. Because everyone deserves a chance to grow and learn, and become something greater than they were. Captain Veltar's expression hardened again. But protection comes with responsibility. We expect those we protect to show gratitude and respect, not arrogance and mockery. We expect them to learn and grow, not to remain ignorant and insulting. Tyler finally understood the magnitude of his crime. He hadn't just been rude to alien soldiers. He had insulted the Guardians who had literally saved his entire species from extinction, multiple times without humanity ever even knowing it was in danger. The Royal Guard training facility was unlike anything Tyler had ever seen. They descended deep beneath the Crystal Palace through passages that seemed to be carved from solid rock, lit by the same glowing symbols that decorated the upper levels. The air grew warmer as they went deeper, and Tyler could hear sounds that made his skin crawl. Distant rumbling, electronic humming, and occasionally what sounded like screams. Where are we going? Tyler asked, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Lieutenant Zixino didn't slow his pace. To the Crucible. It is where all royal guards are forged, where we learn to face the darkness that threatens all life. They emerged into a vast underground chamber that took Tyler's breath away. The space was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows above. The floor was divided into different sections, each one containing what appeared to be some kind of training equipment or simulation chamber. But this wasn't like any training facility Tyler had ever imagined. One section contained what looked like a miniature star, blazing with nuclear fire, but somehow contained within a transparent barrier. Another section appeared to be filled with the vacuum of space itself, complete with floating asteroids and debris. A third area seemed to exist in complete darkness, so black that Tyler's eyes couldn't penetrate it at all. This is where you will spend the next 3 days, Lieutenant Zixino said. Each section represents a different type of threat that Royal Guards must be prepared to face. You will experience all of them. Tyler stared at the various training areas in growing horror. But I'm just human. I can't survive in space or near a star or whatever that dark thing is. The simulations have been modified for your physical limitations, the lieutenant replied. You will not die from environmental exposure, but everything else will be real. The fear, the pain, the exhaustion, the desperation. Those cannot be reduced without making the trial meaningless. A group of technicians approached, wheeling a cart containing what appeared to be a suit of armor. It was smaller and less ornate than the Royal Guard armor, but Tyler could see the same energy channels running through the metal and the same soft blue glow emanating from various components. This is training armor, Lieutenant Zixinos explained. It will keep you alive in the various environments, but it will not make the trials easy. You must still prove your courage and determination. As the technicians helped Tyler into the armor, he was amazed by how light it felt despite its apparent bulk. The suit seemed to adjust itself to his body, forming a perfect fit that felt almost like a second skin. When the helmet was placed over his head, his vision was enhanced by displays showing environmental data, threat assessments, and tactical information. The armor's intelligence will guide you through the basic functions, Lieutenant Zixinos said, his voice now coming through speakers in Tyler's helmet. But it cannot make decisions for you or give you courage. Those must come from within. The first trial began immediately. Tyler found himself standing at the edge of the space simulation chamber, looking out at a recreation of the void between stars. The barrier that separated the training area from the rest of the facility was completely invisible, making it seem as if he was standing on the edge of an airlock looking into real space. Your first trial is simple, Lieutenant Zixinos' voice explained. Cross the void and retrieve the beacon on the far side. There are no enemies, no immediate threats, just you and the infinite darkness. Tyler took a tentative step forward and found himself floating in zero gravity. The sensation was disorienting and terrifying. There was no up or down, no reference, points except for distant stars that provided no sense of scale or direction. His armor's thrusters activated automatically to stabilize him, but the feeling of being completely alone in the vastness of space was overwhelming. I can't do this, Tyler said, his voice shaking. It's too big, too empty. I feel like I'm going to fall forever. That fear, Lieutenant Zixinos replied, is something every Royal Guard must overcome. We fight our battles in environments like this, facing enemies that use the void itself as a weapon. If you cannot move through empty space, how can you face the things that hunt in the darkness between stars? Tyler forced himself to continue forward, using his armor's thrusters to navigate toward the distant beacon. But with each meter he traveled, the sensation of isolation grew worse. He felt like a tiny speck of life in an ocean of death, vulnerable and insignificant. By the time he reached the beacon, he was hyperventilating and covered in sweat. Congratulations, Lieutenant Zixinos said as Tyler retrieved the glowing device. You have completed the easiest trial we have prepared for you. The second day brought Tyler face to face with the contained star. Even through his armor's protection, he could feel the immense heat and radiation pouring off the miniature nuclear furnace. His task was to approach close enough to plant a monitoring device on the star's surface, simulating the kind of mission Royal Guards regularly undertook during the Machine War. The enemy used stars as power sources, Lieutenant Zixinos explained as Tyler stared at the blazing ball of nuclear fire. We had to get close enough to plant charges that would destabilize their equipment. Many guards died in missions exactly like this one. Tyler's first attempt to approach the star ended in failure when the heat overwhelmed his armor's cooling systems and he had to retreat. His second attempt got him closer, but the radiation began affecting his vision and motor control. It wasn't until his fifth try that he managed to reach the star's surface and plant the device, and by then he was barely conscious from the strain. Guard Commander Thalvin, Lieutenant Zixinos said as Tyler recovered, did this same mission while under fire from enemy ships. He planted 17 charges on 17 different stars in a single engagement, saving an entire sector from machine conversion. But it was the third day that truly broke Tyler's spirit and rebuilt it. He was placed in the darkness chamber, where the absence of light was so complete that his armor's sensors couldn't penetrate it. Somewhere in that darkness were enemies, simulated but terrifyingly real, that he had to detect and defeat. The Void Hunters Lieutenant Zixanos explained, were the machine's scouts. They existed in the spaces between dimensions, invisible to most sensors, striking without warning. Guards had to learn to fight enemies they couldn't see, hear, or predict. Tyler spent hours stumbling through the absolute darkness, jumping at every sound, firing at shadows that might or might not be there. The psychological pressure was enormous. He knew intellectually that he was in a simulation, that he wasn't really in danger, but his mind and body couldn't tell the difference. When something finally attacked him from the darkness, Tyler screamed. The enemy was fast and silent, striking from directions he couldn't anticipate. His armor's defensive systems activated automatically, but he had to learn to fight back, to track his attacker by sound and movement rather than sight. By the time he finally defeated the simulated void hunter, Tyler was sobbing with exhaustion and terror. He had never been so scared in his entire life, never felt so helpless and alone. But he had also never felt such a sense of accomplishment when he succeeded. Every Royal Guard, Lieutenant Zixanos said quietly as Tyler sat in the darkness, shaking, has fought real void hunters, not simulations, but actual creatures that could tear apart starships with their bare claws. And they did it knowing that failure meant not just their own death, but the death of entire worlds full of innocent beings. Tyler looked up at the lieutenants, glowing golden eyes visible even in the absolute darkness. How do you do it? How do you face things like that and not go insane? Because someone has to, Lieutenant Zixanos replied simply. Because if we don't stand against the darkness, who will? Your people. They don't even know the darkness exists. So we stand and we fight, and sometimes we die, so that others can live in peace. As Tyler was led out of the training facility, on the evening of the third day, he was a completely different person than the arrogant teenager who had entered. He had experienced just a tiny fraction of what Royal Guards faced regularly, and it had pushed him to his absolute limits. He finally understood what courage really meant, what sacrifice really cost, and what honor really demanded. The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Lieutenant Zixanos moved, and Tyler's world turned upside down in ways he never could have imagined. The speed was impossible. One moment Tyler was standing upright with his hands on the guard's helmet, and the next moment he was flat on his back on the crystal floor with something wrapped around his throat. He hadn't even seen the guard move. It was as if reality had skipped a frame, jumping from one scene to another without any transition. Tyler tried to breathe and couldn't. The grip around his neck wasn't choking him, but it was firm enough to make every breath a conscious effort. He looked up and saw Lieutenant Zixanos standing over him, one armored hand holding Tyler's throat, while the guard remained perfectly balanced and controlled. The armor that Tyler had thought was heavy and cumbersome hadn't made a sound during the lightning-fast movement. The guard had moved like liquid mercury, flowing from stillness to action and back to stillness without any visible effort. And the strength behind that grip was terrifying. Tyler could feel that the guard was barely using any pressure at all. But he knew instinctively that those armored fingers could crush his windpipe like a paper tube if they wanted to. "Let me go," Tyler gasped, his voice coming out as a strangled whisper. He tried to grab at the guard's armored wrist, but his hands might as well have been trying to move a mountain. The armor was solid, immovable, and the guard's arm didn't even tremble under Tyler's desperate attempts to break free. Captain Veltar stepped forward, his massive form seeming to grow even larger as he approached. His golden eyes were blazing with fury, and when he spoke, his voice filled the hall like thunder. "Tyler Blake of Earth," the captain announced formally, "you have committed Kethmaran against a royal guard of the Zephyrian Empire. You have touched the sacred helm of a warrior without permission, showing disrespect to every guard who has served and every hero who has fallen. The penalty for this crime is immediate exile to the Crimson Wastes." Tyler's eyes went wide with panic. He didn't know what the Crimson Wastes were, but exile sounded bad enough on its own. Wait, he wheezed, still struggling against Lieutenant Zixanos' grip. "I didn't know it was against the law. I was just curious about the helmet. It's not like I was trying to hurt anyone." "Ignorance of our laws does not excuse the crime," Captain Veltar replied coldly. "You were warned repeatedly to show respect. You chose to ignore those warnings and mock our customs. Now you will face the consequences." Ambassador Blake rushed forward, his face pale with terror. He had studied Zephyrian law during his preparation for this mission, and he knew what exile to the Crimson Wastes meant. It was essentially a death sentence. The Crimson Wastes were a region of Zephyr Prime where the atmosphere was toxic and the temperature could melt steel. No being could survive there without specialized equipment that took years to develop and cost more than most planets' entire military budgets. "Captain, please," Ambassador Blake begged, falling to his knees. "I take full responsibility for my son's actions. He's young and foolish, but he doesn't deserve to die for a moment of stupidity. Surely there must be some alternative to exile." Tyler was starting to panic as the reality of his situation sank in. These weren't just ceremonial guards playing dress-up. They were real soldiers with real power, and he had just committed what they considered a serious crime. The strength in Lieutenant Xixinos's grip was proof enough that these aliens were far more dangerous than he had imagined. "Please," Tyler gasped, his arrogance finally cracking. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to insult anyone. I was just being stupid. Don't kill me over something so small." Captain Veltar's eyes flared even brighter. "Something small?" he roared, his voice making the crystal walls vibrate. "You call the dishonoring of our sacred traditions something small? You mock the memory of warriors who died protecting ungrateful species like yours, and you call it small?" The captain moved closer, and Tyler could feel heat radiating from his armor like a furnace. "Let me tell you what is small, human child. Your understanding is small. Your respect is small. Your entire species' contribution to galactic peace is small compared to what our guards have sacrificed." Tyler tried to speak, but Lieutenant Xixinos's grip tightened slightly, cutting off his words. The guard's golden eyes were staring down at him with an intensity that made Tyler feel like an insect under a magnifying glass. "The Crimson Wastes," Captain Veltar continued, "are where we send those who prove themselves unworthy of civilized society. The atmosphere will burn your lungs with every breath. The ground will melt the soles of your feet. The radiation will cook your organs from the inside. Most beings last less than an hour before begging for death." Tyler's eyes filled with tears of pure terror. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He was supposed to be the advanced human showing these primitive aliens how superior Earth technology was. He wasn't supposed to be facing execution for touching someone's hat. "But we are not without mercy," Captain Veltar said, though his tone didn't sound merciful at all. "Before your exile begins, you will be given a chance to understand what you have insulted. Lieutenant Xixinos will show you exactly what it means to be a royal guard." The lieutenant lifted Tyler effortlessly to his feet, maintaining his grip on the young man's throat. Tyler felt like a rag doll in the guard's hands, completely powerless and helpless. The armor that had looked so bulky and cumbersome was clearly powered by technology beyond anything Tyler had ever encountered. "You wanted to see what was under my helmet." Lieutenant Xixinos spoke for the first time, his voice deep and resonant. "Very well. But first you will see what this armor really is." With his free hand, the lieutenant touched a symbol on his chest plate. Instantly, the armor began to glow with soft blue light, and Tyler could see energy flowing through channels, carved into the metal. The humming sound returned, but now Tyler could feel it in his bones, a vibration that seemed to resonate with every cell in his body. "This armor," the lieutenant continued, "has walked through plasma storms that would vaporize your strongest warships. It has withstood the gravity of collapsed stars and the crushing pressure of gas giant atmospheres. It has been blessed by high priests and blessed by the blood of heroes." Tyler stared at the glowing patterns in growing horror as he realized that what he had thought was primitive decoration was actually some kind of advanced energy system beyond his comprehension. "And this helmet," Lieutenant Xixinos said, reaching up with his free hand to touch the very piece that Tyler had tried to remove, "contains the compressed memories of every guard who has worn it before me. When I put it on, I carry the wisdom and experience of warriors who fought battles before your species even discovered fire." Tyler's datapad, which had fallen to the floor during his takedown, suddenly beeped with an incoming message. The lieutenant glanced at it dismissively. "Your primitive device," he said, "operates on principles we gave to your species decades ago. simplified and weakened so that your technology would not accidentally destroy your world. What you think of as your most advanced achievement is a child's toy compared to what we consider basic equipment. Tyler finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't been mocking primitive aliens in costume armor. He had been insulting warriors whose technology and experience were so far beyond humanity that Earth was essentially under their protection, whether humans realized it or not. And now he was going to die for his ignorance and arrogance. Tyler had crossed so many lines already that he thought one more wouldn't matter. The royal guard stood like statues around the Hall of Honor, their glowing eyes fixed on him, but they hadn't actually done anything to stop his disrespectful behavior. In his mind, this proved they were all show and no substance. "You know what?" Tyler said, pulling out his datapad again. "I want to get some pictures of these costume guys. The people back on Earth aren't going to believe how ridiculous alien soldiers look." He walked directly toward Lieutenant Zixinos, one of the younger guards who stood near a memorial plaque showing a female Zephyrian warrior. The lieutenant was tall and imposing like the others, but his armor had fewer decorations, marking him as less senior than Captain Veltar. "Hey there, statue man," Tyler said as he approached. "Mind if I get a selfie with you? I promise I'll make you look good." Lieutenant Zixinos didn't respond or move, maintaining the perfect stillness that all royal guards were trained to display during ceremonial duties. His golden eyes tracked Tyler's movement, but otherwise he remained motionless. Tyler activated his datapad's camera function and held it up, positioning himself next to the silent guard. "Smile for the camera, alien boy," he said, making an exaggerated grin and giving a thumbs-up gesture. The datapad made a soft clicking sound as it captured the image. Tyler looked at the result and laughed. "Perfect. You look just as scary as I thought you would. Like some kind of robot butler in fancy dress-up clothes." Still getting no reaction from Lieutenant Zixinos, Tyler became bolder. He moved closer to the guard and started posing in different positions, taking multiple pictures. He made silly faces, pretended to be scared of the motionless figure, and even tried to imitate the guard's rigid posture. "This is great," Tyler said loudly, making sure everyone in the hall could hear him. "I'm going to post these all over social media when I get back to Earth. Check out the scary alien guards that can't even move without permission." Ambassador Blake was sweating now, knowing that his son had gone far beyond any acceptable behavior. He could see the tension building in every Zephyrian present, could feel the atmosphere growing heavier with each passing moment. "Tyler, that's enough," he called out. "Come away from there right now." But Tyler was enjoying himself too much to stop. The lack of reaction from the guards had convinced him that they were powerless to do anything about his behavior. In his mind, he was proving human superiority by showing how he could do whatever he wanted to these supposedly mighty alien warriors. "Just a few more pictures, Dad," Tyler called back. "I want to show everyone how intimidating these guys really are." He moved even closer to Lieutenant Zixinos, now standing directly in front of the guard. The lieutenant was so tall that Tyler had to crane his neck back to see the glowing eyes behind the helmet's visor. "You know what would make this even better?" Tyler said, grinning at his own cleverness. "If I could see what you actually look like under all that armor." He reached out and poked the guard's armored chest with his finger. The metal was surprisingly warm to the touch, and he could feel a subtle vibration like electricity running through the armor plating. "Feels real enough," Tyler said. "But I bet it's just for show. Probably made of some kind of lightweight material that looks impressive but doesn't actually protect anything." Lieutenant Zixinos still didn't move, but Tyler noticed that the golden glow from his eyes had intensified significantly. The air around the guard seemed to be getting warmer, and Tyler could swear he heard a low humming sound coming from somewhere inside the armor. "I wonder," Tyler continued, emboldened by the continued lack of response, "what your face looks like under that helmet. Are you as ugly as the rest of your people, or do you have some kind of special alien features?" He reached up toward the guard's helmet, his fingers brushing against the smooth metal surface. The helmet was beautifully crafted, with intricate engravings that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Tyler could feel the warmth radiating from it, and the humming sound grew slightly louder. "Tyler, no!" Ambassador Blake shouted suddenly, realizing what his son was about to do. But Tyler was already committed to his course of action. His fingers found what looked like a release mechanism on the side of the helmet, and he began trying to figure out how to remove it. "Come on, statue man," he said, tugging at the helmet. "Let me see what you're hiding under there. I bet you're not nearly as scary without all this costume jewelry." The moment Tyler's hand made contact with the helmet's primary seal, everything changed. The warm, humming sound that had been barely audible suddenly became a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the crystal walls of the hall. Every light in the chamber flickered, and the floating memorial symbols began pulsing in rapid, agitated patterns. Lieutenant Xixinos had still not moved, but Tyler could feel a change in the air around him. It was like standing next to a powerful, electrical generator that was building up energy for discharge. The golden glow from the guard's eyes had become so bright that Tyler could barely look at it directly. "Interesting," Tyler said, though he was starting to feel the first stirrings of unease. "Did I trigger some kind of security system? What's with all the light and sound effects?" He continued trying to remove the helmet, his fingers fumbling. With mechanisms he didn't understand. The armor's surface was becoming noticeably hotter, and the humming sound was now loud enough that it seemed to fill the entire hall. Minister Kexara spoke for the first time since Tyler had begun his assault on the guard. Her voice was completely calm, but there was something in her tone that made Tyler's blood run cold. "Young human," she said quietly, "I strongly suggest you remove your hands from Lieutenant Xixinos immediately." Tyler looked over at her with a cocky grin. "Why? What's going to happen? Is he going to file a complaint with his supervisor?" He turned back to the helmet and found what he thought was the main release. "Almost got it," he said, applying more pressure to the mechanism. "Just need to figure out how this thing comes off." The humming sound suddenly stopped, leaving the hall in absolute silence. Tyler noticed that even the ambient sounds of the palace had disappeared completely. It was as if the entire building was holding its breath. Then Tyler felt something that made his heart skip a beat. The helmet moved slightly under his hands, just a tiny shift, but it was the first voluntary movement he had seen from any of the guards since entering the hall. "There we go," Tyler said, though his voice was noticeably less confident than before. "I knew it had to come off somehow." What Tyler didn't realize was that touching a royal guard's helmet without permission wasn't just rude or disrespectful. In Zephyrian culture, it was the equivalent of declaring war on the guard personally, challenging their honor, and insulting every warrior who had ever served. The helmet was more than protective gear. It was a sacred symbol of the guard's oath, to protect and serve, and Tyler Blake, in his ignorance and arrogance, had just committed one of the most serious crimes possible in Zephyrian society. The inside of the palace was even more impressive than Tyler had expected, but he refused to show it. Massive halls stretched out before them with ceilings so high they seemed to disappear into shadows above. The walls were made of the same crystal as the exterior, but here they pulsed with soft light that changed colors as they walked past. Strange symbols floated in the air, glowing and shifting like living things. "More light shows," Tyler muttered, though privately he wondered how they were making the symbols float without any visible technology. "This place is like a bad science fiction movie." Minister Kexara led them through corridor after corridor, explaining the history and significance of various rooms and artifacts. Her voice never changed from its calm musical tone, even as Tyler continued to interrupt with rude comments and complaints. "This is the Hall of Memories," she said, gesturing to a vast chamber filled with floating crystals of different sizes. Each crystal contained what looked like moving pictures, showing scenes of Zephyrian history. "Here we preserve the important moments of our civilization." Tyler barely glanced at the crystals. Instead, he was focused on his datapad, playing some kind of shooting game with loud sound effects. The electronic beeps and explosions echoed through the sacred hall, making several Zephyrians wince. "Tyler," his father whispered urgently, "put that away. Show some respect." "Why?" Tyler asked without looking up from his game. "It's not like they're showing us anything important. Just a bunch of floating rocks with pictures in them. We have better special effects in our movies back home." One of the royal guard stepped forward slightly, the first movement any of them had made since entering the palace. Tyler noticed and laughed. "Oh look, one of the statue guys moved. What's wrong? Did I hurt your feelings talking about your pretty crystals?" The guard's golden eyes flared brighter, and Tyler could swear he heard a sound like grinding metal coming from inside the armor. But the guard didn't speak or move again, returning to his statue-like pose. They continued the tour, moving deeper into the palace. Tyler's behavior got worse with each room they visited. In the Gallery of Sciences, where Zephyrian innovations were displayed, he called their inventions cute toys. In the Chamber of Art, he said their sculptures looked like melted garbage. But it was when they reached the Hall of Honor that Tyler's disrespect reached new levels. This was clearly the most sacred part of the palace, a solemn chamber with walls lined with what appeared to be memorial plaques. Each plaque bore the image of a fallen Zephyrian warrior, along with symbols that Tyler assumed were their names and accomplishments. "This hall commemorates our greatest heroes," Minister Kexara said, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "These warriors gave their lives protecting not just our world but many others throughout the galaxy. They fought against forces that would have destroyed entire civilizations." Tyler looked around the hall with obvious boredom. "Great. A dead people museum. How long is this going to take? I'm getting hungry and this is seriously boring." The royal guards who had been following them spread out along the walls, taking positions near various memorial plaques. Tyler noticed that each guard seemed to position himself near specific memorials, and their golden eyes grew even brighter as they stood in silent tribute. "These warriors," Minister Kexara continued, "faced enemies that most beings cannot even imagine. They ventured into the void between stars and fought creatures of pure energy. They defended the weak and brought peace to blah blah blah." Tyler interrupted loudly, waving his hand dismissively. "More alien history lessons. Look, lady, I don't care about your dead space soldiers or whatever. Can we please move on to something interesting? Like maybe some food, or at least somewhere with decent entertainment?" The temperature in the hall seemed to drop several degrees. Every Zephyrian present had gone completely still, their faces unreadable masks of controlled emotion. The royal guard's eyes were now blazing with golden light so bright that Tyler had to squint when he looked directly at them. Ambassador Blake's face had gone pale. He recognized the signs of a serious diplomatic incident developing and tried desperately to salvage the situation. "Minister Kexara, please forgive my son's youth and inexperience. He means no disrespect to your honored dead." But Tyler wasn't finished. "Actually, Dad, I do mean disrespect. This whole thing is stupid. We're supposed to be here talking about trade agreements and technology sharing, not looking at pictures of dead aliens. These people need to get their priorities straight." Turned back to his data pad and cranked up the volume on his game. The sounds of laser blasts and explosions filled the sacred hall, echoing off the crystal walls in a cacophony that seemed to mock the solemn atmosphere. "Tyler Blake," Minister Kexara said, and for the first time her voice carried an edge of steel. "You are standing in the presence of heroes who died so that worlds like yours could exist in peace. Perhaps you should consider showing them the respect they deserve." Tyler looked up from his game with an exaggerated sigh. "Look, I get it, okay? They were heroes, they saved the galaxy, whatever. But they're dead now, right? So what's the point of standing around staring at their pictures? It's not like they care anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler could hear his own breathing and the quiet hum of his datapad, but nothing else. The royal guards had become so still they might have been carved from stone except for their eyes, which now blazed like miniature suns. Captain Veltar, the largest of the guards, slowly turned his massive head toward Tyler. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of barely controlled fury. "Young human," he said, each word carefully measured, "you stand in a place more sacred than your species' greatest temples. You speak of warriors whose courage saved billions of lives across 1,000 worlds. Perhaps you would benefit from understanding what true sacrifice means." Tyler actually laughed. "Oh, great. Now the costume guy is talking. What are you going to do, lecture me about respect? You're just a guard in fancy armor. I bet you've never even been in a real fight." "Captain." Veltar's eyes flared so brightly that Tyler had to look away. The air around the guard captain began to shimmer more intensely, and Tyler could swear he felt heat radiating from the massive figure, despite being several feet away. "Careful, boy," the captain said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried clearly through the entire hall. "You know nothing of what you speak. These costume guys have seen battles that would break your mind. We have walked through the fires of dying stars and emerged victorious. Do not mistake our patience for weakness." But Tyler was too deep into his arrogant performance to back down now. He had an audience of important aliens watching him, and in his twisted logic, he thought he was showing them how tough and independent humans could be. "Yeah, right," he said, putting his datapad away and crossing his arms. "I'm sure you're all really tough, but this is the modern age, not some fantasy story. Real soldiers use real weapons and real technology, not ceremonial armor and fancy light shows." He gestured dismissively at the memorial plaques around them. "And all these dead heroes? I bet they died because they didn't have proper equipment. If they'd had human technology, they probably would have lived through whatever killed them." Tyler Blake pressed his face against the small window of the diplomatic shuttle and rolled his eyes at what he saw below. The planet Zephyr Prime stretched out beneath them like some kind of weird crystal garden, all shiny towers and strange blue buildings that looked like they were made of glass. He thought it looked stupid and primitive compared to the sleek metal cities back on Earth. "This place looks like a bunch of aliens tried to build something pretty but failed," Tyler said loudly, not caring that the Zephyrian pilot could probably hear him. His father, Richard Blake, the Earth ambassador, shot him a warning look from across the shuttle cabin. "Tyler, keep your voice down," his father whispered. "We're guests here, and these people are our allies." Tyler laughed and pulled out his datapad, the latest model from Earth with holographic displays and quantum processing. "Dad, look at this place. Their whole planet looks like it's stuck in the Stone Age. I bet they've never even seen tech like this." He waved his datapad around, making sure the blue-skinned pilot could see it. The shuttle landed with a soft thud on what looked like a landing pad made of smooth purple stone. Tyler could see dozens of tall figures waiting for them, all wearing elaborate armor that gleamed in the strange double sunlight of Zephyr Prime. They stood perfectly still like statues, which made Tyler smirk. "Great, a costume party," he muttered as the shuttle doors opened. The moment they stepped outside, Tyler felt the warm air hit his face. It smelled different here, like flowers and ozone. The gravity was a bit lighter than Earth, making him feel bouncy with each step. But instead of being amazed by being on an alien world, Tyler just complained. "Ugh, the air smells weird," he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And why is everything so bright here? Don't these people have normal lighting?" A tall Zephyrian woman approached them. She had pale blue skin and silver hair that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her clothing was simple but elegant, made of what looked like liquid metal that flowed as she moved. Tyler thought she looked ridiculous. "Welcome to Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Blake," she said in perfect English, her voice musical and calm. "I am Minister Kexara. We are honored by your visit." Ambassador Blake bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he had learned during his diplomatic training. "The honor is ours, Minister. Thank you for this opportunity to strengthen our alliance." Tyler didn't bow. Instead, he was staring at the royal guards lined up behind Minister Kexara. They were huge, easily 7 feet tall, wearing armor that looked like it was carved from dark metal and decorated with glowing blue symbols. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that had narrow eye slits, and Tyler could see golden light glowing from within those slits. "Are those supposed to be scary?" Tyler asked, pointing directly at the guards. "They look like they're wearing Halloween costumes. What's with the glowing eyes? Is that some kind of cheap special effect?" The silence that followed was so complete that Tyler could hear his own heartbeat. Every Zephyrian present had gone perfectly still, and even the ambient sounds of the city seemed to fade away. Minister Kexara's expression didn't change, but Tyler noticed her hands clench slightly at her sides. "Tyler," his father hissed under his breath, "apologize right now." But Tyler was just getting started. "I mean, seriously, Dad. Look at them. They're just standing there like robots. I bet they can't even move in all that heavy armor. Back on Earth, our military gear is way more advanced. These guys probably can't even run in those outfits. One of the royal guards, the largest one in the center with extra decorations on his armor, turned his head slightly toward Tyler. The golden glow from his helmet's eye slits seemed to brighten, and Tyler felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm air. "Perhaps," Minister Kexara said carefully, "we should begin the tour of our palace. I believe you will find our architecture quite interesting, young Tyler." As they walked through the city streets toward the massive crystal palace in the distance, Tyler continued his commentary. He pointed at buildings and called them weird-looking. He laughed at Zephyrian citizens who stopped to watch the diplomatic procession pass, making comments about their blue skin and strange clothing. "Do they all look like that?" he asked loudly. "The blue skin thing is so weird. And what's with their hair? It's like they stuck their fingers in electrical sockets." Ambassador Blake was mortified. He had spent months preparing for this visit, knowing how important it was for Earth's relationship with the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrians controlled key trade routes and had technology that could benefit humanity for generations. And here was his son, acting like a spoiled brat on the most important diplomatic mission of his career. The royal guards marched alongside them in perfect formation, their boots making rhythmic sounds on the crystal pavement. Tyler noticed that despite their heavy-looking armor, they moved with fluid grace, never breaking step or making any unnecessary noise. But instead of being impressed, he saw it as more evidence of their primitive nature. "Look at them marching, like toy soldiers," Tyler said to his father. "I bet they spend all day practicing that instead of doing anything useful. Our Marines could take all of them down in seconds with real weapons." The guard captain, a massive figure whose armor bore more decorative elements than the others, was walking close enough to hear every word Tyler said. The golden glow from his helmet had grown steadily brighter during the walk, and Tyler noticed that the air around the captain seemed to shimmer slightly, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. As they approached the palace gates, Tyler pulled out his datapad again and started taking pictures. "Wait until the guys back home see this place," he laughed. "They're going to think I'm visiting some kind of theme park. Look at all this fake crystal stuff. It's like they're trying too hard to look mystical or something." The palace gates were enormous, made of what appeared to be a single piece of clear crystal carved with intricate patterns. Tyler walked right up to them and knocked on the crystal with his knuckles. "Yep, sounds hollow," he announced. "Probably just cheap plastic made to look fancy." Behind him, Tyler heard what sounded like a low growl, but when he turned around, all the royal guards were standing perfectly still as before. Their golden eyes glowed steadily, watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl, but he pushed the feeling aside and continued acting like he owned the place. Tyler emerged from the training facility a changed person. His body ached from 3 days of trials that had pushed him far beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. His mind was reeling from encounters with simulated horrors that had shown him just how dangerous and vast the universe really was, but most importantly, his heart was filled with a new understanding of what the royal guards truly represented. Lieutenant Zixinos walked beside him as they returned to the upper levels of the palace. The guards' golden eyes, which had once seemed intimidating and alien to Tyler, now looked familiar and reassuring. Tyler had learned to read the subtle signs of emotion in those glowing orbs, to recognize concern, approval, and even something like friendship. "How do you feel?" the lieutenant asked as they climbed the stone steps. Tyler thought about the question carefully. 3 days ago, he would have given a quick, superficial answer. Now he understood that the question deserved real consideration. "Scared," he said honestly. "Humbled. Ashamed of who I was when I arrived here, and grateful to be alive." "Those are good feelings for someone who has learned important truths," Lieutenant Zixinos replied. "Fear keeps you alert to danger. Humility allows you to continue learning. Shame motivates you to be better, and gratitude helps you appreciate what others have sacrificed for you." They reached the Hall of Honor, where Tyler's trial had begun. The memorial plaques still lined the walls, but now Tyler saw them completely differently. Instead of boring displays about dead aliens, he saw tributes to heroes who had faced the kinds of challenges he had just experienced, except their battles had been real and the stakes had been the survival of entire civilizations. High Priestess Nalthara was waiting for them, along with Captain Veltar, Minister Kexara, and Ambassador Blake. Tyler's father looked like he had aged years during the 3 days of trials, his face drawn with worry and exhaustion. "Tyler," Ambassador Blake said, embracing his son. "Thank God you're alive, I was so worried." Tyler hugged his father back, but his attention was focused on High Priestess Nalthara. The ancient Zephyrian studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "You have completed the trials," she said. "But completion is not the same as success. Tell me, Tyler Blake of Earth, what have you learned?" Tyler took a deep breath, knowing that his life still hung in the balance. But more than that, he knew that this moment would determine not just whether he lived or died, but what kind of person he would be for the rest of his life. "I learned that I was a fool," he began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I thought I understood strength and courage and advancement, but I understood nothing. I mocked warriors who have sacrificed more than I could ever imagine. I insulted the memory of heroes who died protecting people like me, people who didn't even know they needed protecting." He turned to face the memorial plaques, his voice growing stronger as he continued. "I learned that real courage isn't about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about facing the darkness even when you're terrified, even when you know you might die, because someone has to stand between the innocent and the things that would destroy them." High Priestess Nalthara nodded slowly. "Continue." "I learned that my people exist because of the sacrifices made by yours," Tyler said, looking directly at Captain Veltar. "Earth wasn't discovered by aliens. We were saved by them. Humanity didn't develop independently. We were protected and guided so we could grow safely. And instead of being grateful for that protection, I came here acting like we were superior to the people who have been keeping us alive for thousands of years." Captain Veltar's golden eyes had dimmed from their previous blazing fury to a softer, more thoughtful glow. "And what will you do with this knowledge?" Tyler had been thinking about that question throughout his trials. "I want to learn more. I want to understand not just the mistakes I made, but how to avoid making them again. I want to study Zephyrian history and culture, not because I have to, but because I owe it to your people to truly understand what you've done for the galaxy." He paused, then added, "And I want to make sure that other humans understand too. My species needs to know what we owe to yours. We need to know that we're not alone in the universe, and that the beings protecting us deserve our respect and gratitude, not our arrogance and mockery." High Priestess Nalthara exchanged glances with Captain Veltar and Minister Kexara. Some kind of silent communication passed between them, the kind that comes from centuries of working together. "There is one final test," the High Priestess said. "You speak of understanding and respect, but words are easy. Show us that your understanding is real." She gestured toward the memorial plaques. "Choose one hero from these walls. Learn their name, their story, and their sacrifice. Tell us why their memory deserves honor." Tyler walked slowly along the wall, reading the symbols and studying the images. The text was in Zephyrian script, which he couldn't read, but his armor's translation systems provided the basic information. He stopped before one plaque that showed a female Zephyrian warrior in Royal Guard armor. "This is Guard Commander Velthania," Tyler said, reading from his helmet's display. "She led the defense of the Kepler Nursery during the Machine War." The Kepler Nursery was a system where 17 different species were developing their first civilizations. Tyler's voice grew more emotional as he continued reading. "When the machines attacked, Commander Velthania and her unit knew they couldn't save all 17 worlds with the forces they had. So she made a choice. She divided her guards into 17 groups, sending one guard to each world with orders to fight until the civilians could be evacuated. He turned to face the others. She knew it was a suicide mission. 17 guards against a machine fleet that could consume star systems. But she did it anyway because those 17 worlds contained billions of innocent beings who couldn't defend themselves." Tyler's voice cracked as he finished the story. "Commander Velthania was the last to evacuate. She stayed on the final world, holding off the machines alone while the last transport ships escaped. She died buying time for civilians she had never met people whose names she didn't know because it was the right thing to do. The silence that followed was profound. Tyler realized he was crying again, but this time it wasn't from fear or exhaustion. It was from finally understanding what real heroism looked like. "That story," he said quietly, "describes someone better than I could ever hope to be. But maybe, if I work hard enough and learn enough and grow enough, I could become someone worthy of the protection she died to provide." High Priestess Nalthara smiled, and for the first time it was a warm, genuine expression. "Tyler Blake of Earth, you have passed the trial of understanding. Your life is yours to live." Captain Veltar stepped forward and performed a formal salute. "Young human, you have shown that your species is capable of growth and wisdom. Perhaps there is hope for humanity after all." Tyler returned the salute as best he could, then did something that surprised everyone present. He walked to Lieutenant Zixinos and removed his training helmet, offering it back to the guard with both hands. "Thank you," Tyler said simply, "for teaching me what courage really means, for showing me what honor really costs, and for being patient with someone who didn't deserve your patience." Lieutenant Zixinos accepted the helmet and nodded respectfully. "It was my honor, Tyler Blake. You faced trials that would have broken many beings and you emerged stronger. That is the mark of a true warrior." As Tyler prepared to leave Zephyr Prime with his father, High Priestess Nalthara presented him with a small pin made of the same metal as Royal Guard armor. It was simple and unadorned, just a small circle with the symbol of the Zephyrian Empire engraved in its center. "This is a token of understanding," she explained. "It marks you as someone who has seen the truth behind the protection we provide. Wear it with the knowledge that you carry the responsibility to share what you have learned." Tyler returned to Earth as a completely different person than the one who had left. He spent the next several years studying everything he could about Zephyrian culture and galactic history. He became a vocal advocate for deeper cooperation between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire, working to prepare humanity for eventual full membership in the galactic community. Years later, Tyler returned to Zephyr Prime as an official cultural liaison, one of the first humans to be granted that honor. He wore the small pin proudly, a reminder of the day he learned that true strength comes not from weapons or technology, but from the willingness to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost.